I was with a group of Black folks who went to South Africa, and the Black South Africans there were very glad to see us, and said to one of the people in our group, "You were like a tree without roots, but now that you've come here, you have roots."
Yeah.
And I think the similar applies to history. If we don't know our history, we're like a tree without roots, and that can be blown over, it can shrivel up, it can die. And history is also empowering.
Yeah.
When we know where we came from,
Yeah.
when we hear stories about Myrlie Evers Williams and her becoming determined all over again, well, we start to get ideas and inspiration and the strength to continue to resist today. So it is very deliberate to try to repress this history because they know there's power in knowing our story.
Yeah, there is power in knowing our story. When we look at, really faith and the movement of justice and shifting the needle and what that looks like, I want you to talk about, you mentioned Myrlie Evers again just now, but women have been crucial and essential to every level and stage of the movement for justice.
So yes, and I made a very intentional, deliberate effort in this book to have gender parity throughout each chapter, but also there's an entire chapter
It's a whole chapter.
on Black women in the
Black
Civil Rights
women,
Movement.
yeah.
Because you know that after the March on Washington, first of all, Black women like Dorothy Height and Anna Arnold Hedgeman, they were instrumental in planning it. So we often think of Black women as the hands and feet of the movement. To this day, they're majority in the Black church and
Absolutely.
Foot soldiers of the movement, but they were also masterminds of the movement.
Absolutely.
And strategist Ella Baker was
Ella
brilliant.
Baker
Yeah.
is like she's my shero. She is
Yes.
my superhero. I am like in awe of her. Yeah.
And her longevity in the movement.
Yeah.
She was active for, I think, about 60 years in it. It's a remarkable career.
There was no movement without Ella Baker.
And
Yeah.
she was instrumental. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee had a meeting in North Carolina early on, before it was SNCC. And the original idea, Martin Luther King was thinking, well, maybe you all who were doing the sit-ins, right? These are young Black people who pioneered sit-ins, starting in Greensboro, North Carolina. He said, well, maybe you young people can come under the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which is his organization, and be the youth wing. And Ella Baker said, no, young people, you do your own thing. Start the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And because of that, I think they were able to be as radical as young people want to be in
Yeah.
the movement. They were the only group, or they were the first group to organize and go in big groups to the Mississippi Delta, which groups like NAACP and SCLC, they were even intimidated to go
Very
into.
intimidated.
So yeah, Ella Baker, but Black women in general. I talk about Fannie Lou Hamer, who's one of my heroes. She was also born in the Delta.
I mean, she was the great shift at the Democratic National
Yes.
Convention.
Yes.
What year was that?
1964.
1964, yeah.
Yeah, so she was with the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, which was an insurgent movement, which was biracial, which attempted to unseat the all-white Mississippi delegation, which
Yeah.
was one of those vestiges of the 1890 Constitution, is that Black people couldn't even get a seat in the state delegation for the National Convention. And so she goes there and she gives a public testimony. Now, she had been tortured in a Mississippi jail.
Yeah.
Just for being part of the movement. And she comes back and she gives this stirring testimony. She ends with, "Is this America, where we have to keep our phones off the hooks because we want to live as decent citizens in America?" And it was such a powerful testimony that the president at the time, Lyndon B. Johnson, interrupted it with this made-up anniversary. It was like the 9-month anniversary of something. Who celebrates a 9-month anniversary? But he was trying to interrupt the public live feed, but it had the opposite effect because people knew what he was doing. They were like, oh, well, we definitely need to hear it now. So it actually made her testimony even more popular.
Yeah. You said recently, and this is really, it speaks to this book. You said that, what was it about oppression? Oppression
Yes.
suppresses our ability to dream.
Right.
Oppression suppresses our ability to dream. And so often when we look at a Fannie Lou Hamer, we look at an Ella Baker, so much of that was fueled by the oppression.
Yes,
you
yes.
know?
So, in the last chapter of The Spirit of Justice, I talk about 4 virtues that I've found in common with these over 50 different historical
Yes,
figures
I have those. Yes, go
across
ahead. Yes.
400 years. And those values are faith, courage, imagination, and perseverance. So, on the imagination part, if you think of things like the beloved community, what is happening there is MLK, who popularized but didn't originate the term, is talking about what does society look like? What does a world look like where justice is present, where peace is present? Where he's painting a picture, which is actually part of a prophet's role, not
Yeah.
just to denounce what is, but to announce what
Yeah.
could be.
Yeah.
And that's the role of imagination. But here's the issue: oppression suppresses imagination. So when I lived in the Delta, I was really shocked at the lack of political participation of a lot of the Black people there. And I was like, well, these policies are affecting you first. Like, you feel the worst
Yeah.
of bad policy. Why aren't you more active? Well, in the fourth poorest county in the country, they're concerned about survival.
Yeah.
They don't have much margin for imagination or political participation. And when you are so concerned about literally just living day to day, it's hard to step back from your present reality and imagine a new one.
Yeah.
But there were some who were able to do so. So it is really remarkable that in the cases of the most concentrated oppression, you also get the most creative activists.
Man.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how can we, in this day and age, we look back and we look at our foremothers and forefathers who have gone before us and really blaze the trail for us to live the lives that we get to live right now. What does it look like for young people, even going forward? How can they begin, and we all begin to kind of put our stamp on what justice looks like in this new era of time?
One of the phrases that frustrated me to no end. I'm using polite language on your
Oh,
very very
we don't care
respectful
about polite
podcast.
language. We like all the language.
It pissed me off when you see these T-shirts that said "Not your grandmother's civil rights movement," because I'm like, you don't know what your grandmother went through
Listen.
so that you could march today.
Yeah.
You don't know the experience that Fannie Lou Hamer had being whipped by a blackjack, which was a wooden stick covered in leather. And just to twist the screws a little bit more and add a little bit more cruelty, the white police officers forced Black men to do the beating. You don't realize that John Lewis didn't just cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge and get beat. He got beat. The hardest bone in the body is your cranium. He got beat so hard by a billy club that it fractured his cranium, broke the hardest bone in his body, and he got up and kept marching and became a political elected official. So what I want young people today to understand is that our ancestors were some bad mama jellas.
Listen.
I mean, they were, did I tell you about Robert Smalls?
No. Go
Robert
ahead.
Smalls. I think they are making a movie out of it because his real life is like a movie. So he was born enslaved. He was in an urban area, and they had him working on a ship during the Civil War, a small ship that would, cargo ship. And it was for the Confederates. They would force him to do that labor. And what he noticed was, well, at night, all the white sailors and the captain, they would go off to bars and revelry and all that stuff, leave all the Black people on the ship. So he starts to thinking, well, if they're so trusting of us, I'm gonna do something. And so he gets his family together, he gets some other Black folk together, and then one day, when all the white people leave the ship, he steals the ship. Now, there is a Union blockade preventing any Confederate ships from coming through, and it's the middle of the night. So it's at great risk because he's sailing through this blockade on a Confederate ship. All they see is Confederate. They don't know that it's enslaved people on there.
Right.
So they might fire on it and just sink the boat. But as soon as he crosses the blockade, he puts up the white flag. And then the white Union sailors come on board and they're like, what the heck is this?
Yeah.
All these Black people on here. And he says, we're escaping. We're on your side. What you want us to do?
Wow.
And so actually it frees more than a dozen people in that one trip. And then he wasn't done. He joins the Union Navy and eventually becomes captain of the very ship that he stole from the Confederates.
What?
And then he goes on to be an elected official in South Carolina. So why is it not our grandmother's civil rights movement?
Yeah.
Why is it not our grandfather's civil rights
And
movement?
why have I never heard that story?
Right.
And I
exactly.
like to, consider myself a real, Black history,
Well, there's so much history to tell.
Yeah.
And we get this little unit, like in 8th grade or something, right? And I used to be a 6th grade teacher. I understand all the pressures. It's not that most teachers don't want to teach it, it's that we have so much other stuff to get to. And then there's a role for the church here, too.
Hey, Vault family, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this clip, make sure to check out our full interview on our channel at Vault Empowers Talks. We don't just scratch the surface. We dive deep into the lives of some of the world's most influential leaders and change makers. Don't forget to like, to comment, and be sure to subscribe for more inspiring conversations. See you next time.